Chapter 6. 14 months earlier, Thursday, June 10th, 1976. Naked. The dead man lay on his back in the centre of the slightly tilted autopsy table, framed by blood gutters on all sides. Who was he? Klinger asked. Salisbury said. He worked for Leonard. The room in which the three men stood were illuminated only in the centre by two hooded lamps above the autopsy table. Three walls were lined with computer housing, consoles and monitor boards, and the tiny system bulbs and glowing scopes made ghostly patches of green, blue, yellow, and pale red light in the surrounding shadows. 9 TV display screens, cathode ray tubes, were set high on 3 walls, and 4 other screens were suspended from the ceiling, and all of them emitted a thin bluish-green light. In that eerie glow, the corpse looked less like a real body than like a prop in a horror film. Sombre, almost reverent, Dawson said his name was Brian Kingman. He was on my personal staff. For very long, Klinger asked. 5 years. The dead man had been in his late 20s and in good condition. Now circulation, having ceased 7 hours ago, lividity had set in. The blood had settled into his calves, the back of his thighs, his buttocks, and his lower back, and in these places the flesh was purple and a bit distended. His face was white and deeply lined. His hands were at his sides, his palms up, the fingers curled. Was he married? Klinger asked. Dawson shook his head. No. Family? Grandparents dead. No brothers or sisters. His mother died when he was born, and his father was killed in an auto accident last year. Aunts and uncles? None close. Girlfriends? None that he was serious about or that were serious about him. Dawson said. That's why we chose him. If he disappears, there's no one to waste a lot of time and energy looking for him. Klinger considered that for a few seconds, then he said, You expect the experiment to kill him? We thought there was a chance of it, Ogden said. Smiling grimly, Klinger said, You were right. Something about the General's tone angered Salisbury. You knew the stakes when you came in with Leonard and me. Of course I did, Klinger said. Then don't act as if Klinger's death is entirely my fault. The blame belongs to all of us. Frowning, the General said, Ogden, you misunderstand me. I don't believe that you and Leonard and I are to blame for anything. This man was a machine that broke down, nothing more. We can always get another machine. You're too sensitive, Ogden. Poor boy, Dawson said, regarding the corpse sadly. He would have done anything for me. He did, the General said. He stared thoughtfully at the dead man. Leonard, you've got 7 servants in this house. Did any of them know Kingman was here? That's highly unlikely. We brought him in secretly. For 13 months, his wing of the Greenwich house had been sealed off from the other 20 rooms. It had been provided with a new private entrance, and all of the locks had been changed. The servants were told that experiments, none of them dangerous, were being conducted for a subsidiary of Futurex, and that the security precautions were needed to protect the operations files and discoveries from industrial espionage. If the household staff still curious about what goes on here? Klinger asked. No, Dawson said. So far as they can see, nothing's happened in the past year. The sealed wing has lost its mystery. Then I think we can bury Kingman on this day without too much risk, he faced Salisbury. What happened? How did he die? Salisbury sat on a high white stool at the head of the autopsy table, hooked his heels around one of its rungs and spoke to them across the corpse. We brought Kingman here for the first time in early February. He thought he was helping us with some sociological research that had important business applications for Futurex. During 40 hours of interviews with him, I learned everything I wanted to know about the man's likes, dislikes, prejudice, personality, quirks, desires, and basic thought processes. Later, at the end of February, I went through the transcript of those interviews and selected 5 test points. 5 of Kingman's attitude or opinions that I would try to reverse with a series of subliminals. He had chosen 3 simple test points and 2 complex ones. Kingman craved chocolate candy, chocolate cake, chocolate in every form, and Salisbury wanted to make him ill at the first taste of chocolate. He couldn't or wouldn't eat broccoli, but Salisbury wanted to make him like it. Kingman had an ingrained fear of dogs, and attempt to transform that fear into affection would constitute the third of the simple test points. The remaining 2 indices presented Salisbury with a far greater chance of failure. For to deal with them, he would have to design subliminal commands that bored especially deeply into Kingman's psyche. First of all, Kingman was an atheist. a fact he had hidden successfully from Dawson for 5 years. Secondly, he was extremely prejudiced against blacks, making him over into a God-loving, prayer-saying champion of the Negro would be far more difficult than twisting his taste for chocolate into a loathing of it. By the second week of April, Salisbury completed the subliminal program. Kingman was brought back to the Greenwich House on the 15th of that month, ostensibly to participate in additional sociological research for Futurex, although he wasn't aware of it. He fed the subliminal primer, the drug, on April 15th. Salisbury put him under close medical observation and ran tests on him for 3 days, but he could find no indication of a temporary toxic state, permanent tissue damage, a change in blood chemistry, noticeable psychological damage, or any other deleterious side effects attributed to the drug. At the end of those 3 days, on April 19th, still in excellent health, Kingman took part in what he thought was an experiment in visual perception. He was shown 2 feature-length motion pictures in one afternoon, and at the conclusion of each film, he was required to answer 100 questions that dealt with what he had just seen. His answers were unimportant, and they were filed only because Salisbury habitually filed every scrap of paper in his laboratory. The experiment actually had only one purpose. While Kingman was watching the films, he was also unwittingly absorbing 3 hours of subliminal programming that was meant to change 5 of his attitudes. The events of the following day, April 12, proved the effectiveness of Salisbury's drug and subliminal programs. At breakfast, Kingman tried to eat a chocolate donut, dropped it after one bite, quickly excused himself on the table, went to the nearest bathroom, and threw up. At lunch, he ate 4 portions of broccoli in butter sauce with his pork chops. That afternoon, when Dawson took him on tour of the estate, Kingman spent 15 minutes playing with several of the guard dogs in the kennel. After dinner, when Ogden and Dawson began to discuss the continuing efforts to integrate the public schools in the North, Kingman came on like a lifelong liberal, an ardent advocate of equal rights, and finally unaware of the 2 videotape cameras that monitored his bedroom. In his sealed wing, he said his prayers before going to sleep. Standing now beside the corpse, smiling beautifully, Dawson said to Kingman, "You should have seen it, Ernest. It was terribly inspiring. Ogden took an atheist, a soul condemned to burn in hell, and converted him into a faithful disciple of Jesus, and all in one day." Salisbury was uneasy. He shifted on the stool, ignoring Dawson, staring at the middle of the general's forehead. He said, "Kingman left the estate on April 21st. I set to work immediately to design the ultimate series of subliminals, the one we 3 have discussed 100 times, the program that will give me total and permanent control of the subject's mind through the use of a code phrase. I finished it on 5th of June. We brought Kingman back here on the 8th, 2 days ago." "He wasn't suspicious?" Kingman asked, or upset about all this travel he had asked to do. "To the contrary," Dawson said. "He was pleased that I was using him for such a special project, even if he didn't fully understand what it was. He saw it as a sign of my faith in him, and he thought that if he made himself available for Ogden's work, he would be promoted much sooner than he might have been otherwise. His behaviour wasn't peculiar. I've seen it in every ambitious young executive and management training I've ever known." Tired of standing, the general went to the nearest computer console, swiveled the command chair away from the keyboard, and sat down. He was almost entirely in the shadows. Green light from a display screen washed across his right shoulder and that side of his brutal face. He looked like a troll. "Okay, you finished the program on the 5th. Kingman came up here again on the 8th. You fed him the primes." "No," Salisbury said. "Once the drug had been administered to a subject, there's no need to give him a booster dose. Not even years later, when Kingman arrived, I began at once with the subliminal program. I ran 2 films for him during the evening. That night, the night before last, he had a very bad dream. He woke up sweating, chilled, shaking, dazed, and nauseated. He had trouble getting his breath. He vomited beside the bed." "Fever?" Kingman asked. "No." "Do you think he had a delayed reaction to the drug?" "A month and a half delay?" "Maybe," Salisbury said, but he obviously didn't think that was the case. He got off the stool, went to the desk in a dark corner of the room, and came back with a computer printout. "This is a record of Kingman's sleep patterns between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock this morning. That's the crucial period." He handed it to Dawson. "Yesterday I showed Kingman 2 more films that completed the program. Last night he died in bed." The general joined Dawson and Salisbury in the oval of light at the autopsy table and began to read 2-yard-long sheet of computer paper. Partial recapitulation, medical monitoring program, BK Rep 14, recorded 6th of June 76. This print 6th of June 76. Klinger said you had Kingman hook up to a lot of machines while he slept. Nearly every night he was here right from the beginning, Salisbury said. The first few times there really wasn't any reason for it, but by the time it was necessary for me to keep a close watch on him, he was accustomed to the machines and had learned to sleep tangled up with all those wires. Indicating the print out, the general said, I'm not quite sure what I'm reading here. Likewise, Dawson said. Salisbury suppressed a smile. Months ago he had decided that his best defense against those two sharks were his highly specialized education. He never missed an opportunity to display it for them and to press them with the fact that if they should dispose of him, or neither of them could carry on his research and development or deal with an unexpected scientific crisis after the research and development was finished. Pointing to the first several lines of the printout, he said, the fourth stage of sleep is the deepest. It tends to occur early in the night. Kingman went to bed at midnight and fell asleep at 20 minutes of 1. As you can see here, he achieved the fourth level 22 minutes later. What's the importance of that? Dawson asked. The fourth level is more like coma than any other stage of sleep, Salisbury said. The electroencephalograph shows irregular large waves of just a few cycles per second. There is no bodily movement on the part of the sleeper. It's in stage 4 with the outer mind virtually comatose and with all sensory input shut down tight, that the inner mind becomes the only truly operative part of the mind. Remember, unlike the conscious mind, it never sleeps. But because there isn't any sensory input, the subconscious can't do anything during stage 4 sleep except play with itself. Now, Kingsman's subconscious had something unique to play with. The general said, the key lock program you implanted in him yesterday and the day before. That's right, Salisbury said, and look here further down the printout. All night long, Salisbury said, we rise and fall through the stages of sleep, almost without exception. We descend into deep sleep in steps and ascend from it in steps as well, spending some time at each level along the way. In this case, however, Kingman soared straight up from deep sleep to light sleep, as if a noise in the room had startled him. Was there a noise? Dawson asked. No. What's this REM? Klinger asked. Salisbury said that means rapid eye movement is taking place under the eyelids, which is highly reliable indication that Kingman was dreaming in stage 1. Dreaming? Dawson asked. About what? There's no way of telling. The general scratched the shadow of a beard that shaded his blunt chin even when he was freshly shaved. But you think that the dream was caused by his subconscious playing around with the lock key implant? Yes. And that the dream might have been about the subliminals? Yes. I can't come up with an explanation that makes more sense. Something about the key lock program so shocked his subconscious that he was propelled straight up into a dream. A nightmare. At this point, just a dream. But over the next 2 hours, his sleep patterns became increasingly unusual, erratic. The alpha waves meant Kingman was awake here for 2 minutes. Salisbury said, not wide awake. His eyes were probably still closed. He was hovering on the edge of the first level of sleep. The dream woke him, Klinger said. Probably. The first time he entered deep sleep, Salisbury said, he stayed there for 8 minutes. This time it lasted only 6 minutes. That's the start of an interesting pattern. He was only in deep sleep 3 minutes that time, Klinger said. The cycle is accelerating, at least on the downside. Dawson said, but why? Ernest apparently understands, but I'm not sure I do. Something happened in his subconscious mind during deep sleep, Salisbury said. Something so unsettling that it caused him to leap up into stage 1 sleep and dream. That subconscious experience, whatever it may be, is getting even more intense. Or if it isn't getting more intense, then his ability to withstand it is dwindling, perhaps both. On each occasion, he's able to tolerate for a shorter period of time than he did before. You mean he's in pain in stage 4? Dawson asked. Pain is a condition of the flesh, Salisbury said. It's not the right word for this situation. What is the right word? Anxiety, perhaps, or fear. 1 minute 1 minute that time, Klinger said. By now he's extremely agitated, Salisbury said, speaking of the dead man as if he were still alive. The pattern becomes increasingly unusual and erratic. At 2:20 he gets back to the third level. Look what happens to him after that. Klinger was fascinated by the printout of Brian Kingman's disintegration, as he possibly could have been by the site of the real event. He didn't even reach the fourth level that time before he popped up to stage 1 again. He's having an acute subconscious anxiety attack, Salisbury said. Dawson said, is there such a thing? There is now. His mind is wildly turbulent at this time, yet in such a way that it doesn't wake him up altogether, and it gets worse. He was frightened awake at around 2:37, wasn't he? Dawson asked. Salisbury, that's right, not wide awake, but beyond the first level of sleep into alpha wave territory. You're learning to read it now. Dawson let out his breath somewhat explosively, as if he had been holding it for the past minute. He was a good man, may he rest in peace. There, at the end, the general said, there were 5 consecutive alpha wave readings. Does that mean he was fully awake for 5 minutes before he died? Fully awake, Salisbury said, but not rational. I thought you said he died in his sleep. No, I said he died in bed. What happened in those 5 minutes? I'll show you. Salisbury said. He went to the nearest computer console and briefly used the keyboard. All but 2 of the overhead scanners went dark. One of those was an ordinary television screen controlled by the computer on a closed-circuit arrangement. The other was a cathode ray readout tube. Getting up at the keyboard, Salisbury said, the screen on the right will run a videotape of his last 6 minutes of Kingsman life. The screen on the left will provide a synchronized readout of some of his vital life signs, updating them every 30 seconds. Dawson and Klinger moved closer. The right-hand screen flickered. A sharply focused black and white picture appeared on it. Brian Kingman lying atop his covers on his back, 12 data gathering patches cemented to his head and torso, wires trailing from the patches to his 2 machines at the side of the bed. A manometer was attached to his right arm and wired directly to the smaller of the machine. Kingman glistened with perspiration. He was trembling. Every few seconds one of his arms would jerk up defensively, or one of his legs would kick out at the air. In spite of this movement, his eyes were closed and he was asleep. He's in stage 1 now, Salisbury said. Dreaming, Dawson said. Obviously. At the top of the left-hand screen there was a digital clock that broke down the time count into hours, minutes, seconds, and tenths of seconds. On the soft green background below the clock, my computer generated characters reported on 4 of Kingman's most important life signs. He's still asleep, Salisbury said, but his respiration and pulse have picked up approximately 27%. He appears to be having a bad dream. His thrashing about gets worse in just a moment. He's ready to come out of it now, ready to wake up. Watch closely there. On the black and white screen, Kingman suddenly drew up his knees, kicked out with both feet, drew up his knees again and kept them drawn up almost to his chest. He gripped his head with both hands, rolled his eyes, opened his mouth. He's screaming now, Salisbury said. I'm sorry, there's no audio. What's he screaming at? Dawson said. He's awake now. The nightmare's over. Wait, Salisbury said. His respiration and pulse are soaring, Klinger said. Kingman screamed soundlessly. Look how his chest is heaving, Dawson said. Good God, his lungs will burst. Breathing continuously, but a degree less violent than he had been a moment ago, Kingman began to chew on his lower lip. In seconds his chin was covered with blood. An epileptic seizure, the general asked. Salisbury said no. At 2:59 the left-hand screen began a new line print from the top of the tube. On the black and white screen, Kingman convulsed and was almost perfectly still. His feet twitched and his right hand opened and closed, but otherwise he was motionless. Even his eyes had stopped rolling. They were squeezed tightly shut. The readout screen went blank. Then an instant later flashed an emergency message. Heart attack, Salisbury said. Kingsman's left arm was bent in a V across his chest and seemed to be paralyzed. His left hand was fisted and moving against his neck. Kingsman's eyes were open now. He was staring at the ceiling. He's screaming again, Klinger said. Trying to scream, Salisbury said. I doubt if he could manage more than a croak in his present state. Kingsman's feet stopped kicking. His right hand stopped opening and closing. He stopped trying to scream. It's over, Salisbury said. Simultaneously, the two screens went blank. Brian Kingsman had died again. But what killed him? Dawson's handsome face was the colour of dusting powder. The drug? Not the drug, Salisbury said. Fear. Klinger returned to the autopsy table to have a look at the body. Fear. I thought that's what you were going to say. Sudden, powerful fear can kill, Salisbury said. And in this case, that's where all the evidence points. Of course, I'll do a thorough autopsy, but I don't believe I'll find any psychological cause for the heart attack. Squeezing Salisbury's shoulder, Dawson said, do you mean Brian realised in his sleep that we were on the verge of taking control of him, and that he was terrified of being controlled, that the thought killed him? Something like that. That even if the drug works, the subliminals don't. Oh, they'll work, Salisbury said. I've just got to refine the program. Refine? I'll put it in layman's terms as best I can. You see, to implant the key lock subliminals, I've got to bore a hole through the ID and the ego. Apparently, the first program was too crude. It didn't just bore a hole, it shattered the idea and ego altogether, or very nearly did. I've got to be more subtle the next time. Preface the commands with some careful persuasion. He pushed a wheeled instrument cart to the side of the autopsy table. Not wholly satisfied with Salisbury's explanation, Dawson said. But what if you don't refine it quite enough? What if the next test subject dies? It's conceivable that one member of my personal staff might walk off his job, vanished without a trace, but 2 or 3, impossible. Salisbury opened a drawer in the cart. He took out a thick white linen towel and spread it across the table of the top of the cart. We won't use anyone from your staff for the second test. Where else are we going to get a test subject? Salisbury took surgical instruments one at a time from the drawer and lined them up on the linen. I think the time has come to put together that corporation in Liechtenstein. Hire 3 mercenaries, give them a set of forged papers and bring them here from Europe under their new names. To this house, Dawson asked. That's right. We won't need the world estate in Germany or France for some time. We'll give the drug to all 3 of them. The first day they're here. The second day I'll start the new key lock program with one of them. If it works with him, if it doesn't kill him, then I'll use it on the other 2. Eventually we'll be running the field test in this country. When the time comes for that, we'll be happy to have 2 or 3 well-trained submissive men so close at hand. Scowling, Dawson said, hiring lawyers in Vaduz, establishing the corporation, buying the forged papers, hiring the mercenaries, bringing them here. These are expenditures I didn't want to make until we were certain the drug and subliminals will work as you say. They will. We aren't yet certain. Holding a scalpel to the light, studying the silhouette of his razored edge, Salisbury said, I'm sure the money won't come out of your pocket, Leonard. You'll find some way to squeeze it from the corporation. It's not as easy as all that, I assure you. Futrex isn't a private game park, you know. It's a public corporation. I can't raid the treasury at will. You're supposed to be a billionaire, Salisbury said. In the great tradition of Onassis, Getty Hughes, Futrex isn't the only thing you've got your hand in. Somewhere you found more than $2 million to set up this lab, and every month you manage to come up with the $80,000 needed to maintain it. By comparison, this new expense is trifle. I agree, the General said. It's not your money that's going down a rat hole, Dawson said irritably. If you think the project's a rat hole, Salisbury said, then we should call it off right now. Dawson started to pace, stopped after a few steps, put his hands in his trouser pocket, then took them out again. It's these men that bother me. What men? The mercenaries. What about them? They're nothing but killers. Of course, professional killers. They earn their living by murdering people. I've never had much of anything good to say about freelancers, Klinger said, but that's a simplification, Leonard. It's essentially true. Impatiently, Salisbury said, so what if it is? Well, I don't like the idea of having them in my home, Dawson said. His tone was almost prissy. You hypocritical ass, Salisbury thought. He didn't have the nerve to say it. His confidence had increased over the past year, but not enough to enable him to speak so frankly to Dawson. Klinger said, Leonard, how in the hell do you think we'll fare with the police and the courts if they found out how Kingsman died? Would they just pat us on the head and send us away with a scolding? Do you think that just because we didn't strangle or shoot or stab him, don't hesitate to call us killers. Do you think we'll get off scot-free because although we're killers, we don't earn our living that way? For an instant, Dawson's black eyes, like onyx mirrors, caught the cold fluorescent light and gleamed unnaturally. Then he turned his head a fraction of an inch, and the effect was lost. However, something of the same frigid alien quality remained in his voice. I never touched Brian. I never laid a finger on him. He never said an unkind word. I never said an unkind word to him. Neither Salisbury nor Klinger responded. I didn't want him to die. They waited. Dawson wiped one hand across his face. Very well, I'll move ahead in the construction. I'll get the 3 mercenaries for you. How soon? Salisbury asked. If I'm to maintain secrecy every step of the way, 3 months, maybe 4. Salisbury nodded and continued laying out surgical instruments for the autopsy. Thanks for listening.